A rubber bridge is exactly what it sounds like. It is a bridge made out of rubber that you would put on your guitar. And what the bridge does is it kills all of the harmonic overtones of any note that you might pick or strum. So what you get is the immediate attack and decay of the note, which creates sort of a bouncy sort of effect. And I try to tell people, think in the Hall of the Mountain King, you know, the dun 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 dun. It kind of has that sort of plunky bounciness to it. And a lot of singer-songwriters love it because it gives you that sort of deadened, lo-fi guitar that's been in the closet for 50 years, played on a lo-fi record kind of sound. And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, why is a rubber bridge better than standard guitar? And I think that's the wrong question. Rubber bridges are not quite better, they're just another brush in the toolkit, so to speak. I know that a lot of producers have found use for them in the studio in places you wouldn't expect. Taking your acoustic tracks and layering the rubber bridge take under your standard take, and so that you get a much fuller, like lower range rubber bridge, you know, but just standard acoustic guitar track. I have people who are using it, of course, in Americana, singer-songwritery kind of stuff, but I have people who are using it in space jazz and hip-hop, and my pop-punk band just found a reason to use a rubber bridge on our last album. The uses of it are pretty endless. I think that the immediate popularity of rubber bridges has kind of peaked, but I don't think they're going anywhere. I think they're here to stay. We still consistently sell them, and I think you'll see them in studios hereafter. You'll be hard-pressed to find a legitimate studio that doesn't have a rubber bridge on hand. There are two sort of methods that we started with the rubber bridges, and that was using the vintage guitars like the Harmony Stellas and stuff like that, and then also using more modern guitars like Recording Kings or Gretsch Jim Dandies, stuff like that. A lot of people are using them for live usage, and I find that while the vintage ones tend to sound the best, if you're going to be out 150 nights a year, taking a vintage guitar out can be kind of a nightmare, plus you put the guitar at risk of permanently warping or being damaged. So the modern guitars, such as the Recording Kings or the Gretsch Jim Dandies, really have the added bonus of having a dual-acting truss rod, and really work great in the live setting because you can do full setups on them, and you can you know, set them back up if the neck starts to warp. I really think that the vintage ones thrive in the studio because there's absolutely no beating the sound of a vintage guitar, especially if you want this deadened, you know, rubber bridge classic tone. Using old, dried out, you know, wood that's been on the planet for a very long time, that's going to really help achieve that sound. So I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that the rubber bridge thing is just not particularly my thing. I didn't get into this because I was a big singer-songwriter guy, and I just like went, you know, fell into it naturally. I grew up playing in punk bands, so, you know, the rubber bridge thing was kind of far outside of my realm. But I did love the old Stellas, the Harmonies, the old dime store guitars, stuff you'd buy in a Sears and Roebuck catalog. And what I was doing at the time, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, is I was just gluing those back together, putting pickups in them, and selling those as just stage-ready, you know, vintage playable guitars. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I got my first message like, "Would you do a rubber bridge?" And I had never heard of such a thing. And I didn't know anything about rubber working or how I would do any of that kind of thing. So I said, "I don't know what you're talking about, that's crazy." And then sometime over the COVID pandemic, there was one week where I got a dozen, just, "Would you do a rubber bridge? Would you do a rubber bridge?" And so I sort of came home to my wife and I said, "I've got to figure out something so I can get this into the hands of many musicians as possible." So I spent about 6 months sort of working out my method and trial and erroring what worked and what didn't work. And I came up with something that's uniquely ours. I try to do something that's a lot different from my nearest competitors, something that's maybe a little less muted. And it gives it its own unique sound that I like to call the Nashville rubber bridge sound. Since the sound originates in LA, I really wanted to make the Nashville sound different, maybe less muted, a little bouncier, just sort of like inspired by the chicken picking and the flat picking that's so popular around here. So yeah, this is one of my rubber bridges. This is one we've done a lot of. It's the Recording King Justin Townes Earl. We've probably made 50 or 60 of these at this point. This model lends itself really well because it already has the floating bridge system, so it's easy to blop bloop, and then it's easy to switch it back if you want to use the wood bridge too. What you got here is a Recording King gold foil pickup. That's the pickup we probably use the most often. We've got a simple volume control out here. The rubber bridges itself is right here, but they sit here and can be adjusted for intonation or cocked or something like that. And then we usually put a foam mute kind of behind, and this is really just to kill the break angle overtones to make sure you don't get any of that resonant, like empathetic resonant frequency. That just makes sure that these stay dead silent. The other pickup system that we use is like this one. The pickup is a piezo that is actually in the bridge itself. It's a slightly different sound. It's much less receptive to electrical interference. The gold foil pickup tends to have a little more vintagey sound. This sounds more like just a straight acoustic guitar, sort of preamp sound. I've done models where I've done both, like the one that I did for Noah Kahn, where the piezo is in the bridge, and then also we've got the gold foil clipped in the sound hole. So you could do one, both, or either in that kind of situation. But just the two ways we do it. We've also done a number of other pickup options, such as an arch top with a humbucker in it. We like to get creative with it and don't want to limit ourselves to any one thing.